They say you can't put a price on happiness, but it cost me $250,000 and it was worth every penny. Hi everybody, I'm Rob and I welcome you back to the KCC channel, and I hope you are having a wonderful day today. This title story comes to us from Menad3975. Let's jump right in. My late husband was in a car accident his senior year in 1986 and got a settlement of $30,000 he could access at 18. He was a gearhead and wanted to buy a Corvette, but his mom didn't like that idea, so she made him a deal. If he bought the car, he would have to pay rent and storage for his other cars, or he could buy property and stay home rent-free as long as he wanted. So at 18, we started looking at property, and he bought 10 acres for $5,000. We intended to build there at some point or sell it later on. In the early years, we would have massive ragers. There was no one around to bother, and it was great. Eventually, people bought and built on the lots around us, and zoning laws changed to allow one house per acre. So there were several houses, but it was still rural, and a few of us had large empty acreage the kids would use to ride their dirt bikes. We didn't care, let them have fun. About 15 years ago, another new house went in, and it was right on the property line. They hadn't even finished construction on the house when the wife began calling to demand I take some trees down because they blocked her view. The funny thing was, the view they blocked was from the RV they were living in. Once they moved into the house, they wouldn't even be near those trees. So I said sorry, but no, I'm not cutting the trees. She wasn't happy, and over the next couple years, she called to complain about all sorts of stupid crap and the noise of the kids on dirt bikes. Heck, she even got mad at people riding their horses because they made her dogs bark. One spring day, I drive out there and notice the stream that ran across my property and theirs had been dammed on mine and diverted on my land about 50 yards from their property line, which sent it along the dirt road that went down a hill and up the other side, creating a pond where it was blocked, and another at the bottom of the road, and preventing me from accessing the majority of the property. Now, I knew it was their doing because the previous fall and winter, she had called to complain my stream was causing her property to flood. First off, it wasn't my stream, and her property didn't flood. In wetter months, the stream naturally got larger, it flowed downhill, and it kept to its banks for decades. Their lot was originally heavily wooded, and they had cleared all of the trees, and I could tell they had done a bunch of grading. So if they had water issues, that was their doing, not mine. Anyway, I went home, and the following weekend we grabbed the small backhoe and a couple friends to unblock the stream. We hadn't even unloaded it before we heard her screaming and the cops showed up. They were unsure if they should stop us because our state is pretty environmentally conscious, and there are strict wetland laws. The cops didn't know if we were rerouting the stream or if they had. I completely understand where they're coming from, and I knew this could happen, so not only did I bring pictures to show how the stream had been, but one of our friends was an official at the DOE. He was able to explain the law and that we legally needed to put the stream back. We couldn't do much about the pond except wait for it to dry out, but we sent the stream back down its original channel. Of course, when it got to their freshly graded land, it had no channel to follow, and yeah, it did flood their yard. Unfortunately for them, there happened to be that DOE official who felt it was his duty to issue them a citation for diverting and illegally altering the stream. They ended up having to put the stream bed back and revegetate with native plants and shrubs in a 25-foot buffer zone, which took away a portion of their yard, pay us damages, and got a huge fine. As the spring and summer progress, the kids on dirt bikes discovered the pond. By this time, it's 8 to 18 inches deep, and they are loving riding through it. So instead of just riding through there, they spend hours in that area, much to the annoyance of the neighbor. She calls the police multiple times, but the kids would either be gone or say they have permission to be there. So the police call us, and we say, yep, let them ride. Now, we did have concerns about liability if they got hurt, but we liked pissing her off, so we took the risk. Not the best idea, and thank goodness no one ever did that we know about. A couple years go by. She has learned to text because we ignored her calls when she has something to complain about. I make my annual spring visit and notice there are 23 large cedar and fir trees cut down. 5 have been cut up, and a path leads directly to their very full woodshed. I was pissed. This isn't something I can just fix, and you don't F with my trees. I called the police, and their excuse was that firewood was their sole source of heat, and they needed the wood. They cut so many so it would dry out over the next couple years. They get another no trespassing order. The stream one had expired, and charged with theft and vandalism. It took a couple years, but they ended up having to pay $10,000 for each tree they cut down. So that was nice, plus we sold 15 of the trees and made another $45,000. They were pissed, to say the least. Life goes on, and we still got texts every time she heard a dirt bike, horse goes by, or whatever irritated her on any given day. We started having summer campout parties over the next few years, and she always called the police or fire department. Of course, we never got cited because we are not stupid and didn't break any laws. Sadly, my husband died suddenly, and eventually I decided it was time to sell because I wasn't going to build a house there. So I listed the property for $1 million, which was the market rate at the time. Remember, it was 10 acres and you can build 1 house per acre. Of course, anytime people went out there, she would flag them down and tell them it was flooded and all sorts of nonsense. She didn't want anyone to build or be there. I should have renewed the second trespass order, but it expired right around the time my husband passed, and it just wasn't important at that moment. Developers were not bothered, and we did get a few offers under ask I was happy with, but I really wanted to sell it to an individual who wanted to build a single home, just being stupid and sentimental. My agent wasn't happy, but understood. One day, he calls me with an offer that is much less than any of the others, and they wanted to do an owner-carried contract for 3 years with a balloon payment to pay me off at the end of the 3 years. It's a couple who wanted to meet me out there. I didn't have anything going on the upcoming Saturday, so I said I would meet them with the understanding that I really wasn't interested in carrying the contract and the price was too low. We figured they were hoping to change my mind, and we were hoping they would come in with a better offer. They got there before me, and when I arrived, the bee is there telling them how bad the property is. I parked on the main road and was walking in, so none of them even knew I was there. As I approached, 2 little kids came flying up on dirt bikes. She comes unglued, grabbed a rock and threw it at them, came nowhere close to hitting them. The guy immediately starts yelling at her and tells her to get the F out of there. It scares her and she left. He sees me and begins to apologize, but I stopped that and thanked him. We started talking, and he explained part of the reason they wanted this specific property was because they had 2 young boys who rode motocross, and he loved the trails. Plus, he wanted to build a track for them. When he showed me where, I knew he was my buyer. I took a $250,000 loss on the sale and carried that contract just to spite that bee. While that is a huge sum, remember, we paid $5,000 for it and got almost $300,000 for the trees and another $20,000 for the nonsense with the stream, plus enjoyed the property for almost 30 years, and I got the interest on the contract and the balloon payment, so it wasn't like we really lost out. Plus, knowing the bee was going to be miserable for years to come, you just can't put a price on that. I sold it 6 years ago, and I still go out a couple times a year just to check it out. They have built a beautiful house at the furthest point from the bee, and there is a huge track up by her place. She still sends me nasty texts, and I should probably block her, but it makes me smile each time knowing she is still pissed. Well worth the loss, and I know my late husband would approve. He always knew I was a petty bee. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called 333HE. It says, yeah, the tree thing blows my mind. The absolute audacity of some people. Like, how is their heating issue your problem? OP is being super petty with the sale just to annoy the neighbors, and it's a thing of beauty. Kudos indeed. This was replied to by another user called Main Yogurt Closet 82. Interesting. Being on Reddit, it shocks me how many "my neighbors cut down trees on my property" stories get posted. How could that even go through someone's mind as okay? And it never ends well. They get hit with heavy fines and reimbursement. I mean, I believe people are that dumb, but I can't believe people are that dumb. Further down in the comment thread, there was a user called Bluegrass Grazer who asked OP a question. It says, "Just to be clear, the trees they cut down were not on their property, so they tried to justify cutting down your trees for their comfort?" OP responded to this one and it says, "Yep, the trees were on my property at the top of the hill between the stream and them. They took them all from one area, so it was absolutely noticeable. At first, the husband did tell the officer someone else cut them, but left them, so they just took the wood. I looked at the officer and pointed out they were cut over the winter when the stream was raging. If someone else wanted the trees, there was acres of them. They could have taken on the other side of the stream, so they could be removed easily." And that's when she started talking about how they heated their home and needing the trees. She also pointed out she didn't have trees on her property, so what was she supposed to do? They couldn't claim the trees belonged to them because they had the property surveyed and put markers in every 10 yards, which could be clearly seen. The new owners are really cool and told me if I ever wanted to go riding out there, just let them know. I never have taken them up on it, but this morning I called to see if they would mind if me and a friend brought the horses over for a ride one morning this week. The husband started laughing and told me that at the beginning of the summer, she sent them a letter stating they couldn't make noise or do anything that would cause her dogs to bark before noon and after 6, so to come outside those hours. I'm taking my old paint that she will immediately recognize and know it's me. We bet a bottle of whiskey that she will call the police and claim I'm trespassing within an hour. He will be home and he gets up early, so it's not a big deal. Tomorrow, we ride at dawn. Now, I've checked through OP's profile and all their comments, and I don't see an update to this one yet, so we don't know how it turned out when they took their horses into the property. But if there is an update at some point, I'll add it in on a pinned comment so you all can see it on this story. One thing that's eating at me a little bit about this one is that I feel OP could have taken them for a lot more money than they got from those trees being taken down. If reading the tree law subreddit has taught me anything, it's that single trees can cost hundreds of thousands of dollars because they're almost impossible to replace at that same size. I think the neighbors are lucky that they got off with the fines being as low as they were. Now, another thing to think of too though, is with all these fines that the neighbor paid, they originally could have taken that much money and put in a completely different heating system in their house so they weren't relying on wood. Just a thought. This next story comes to us from Thenoblehigh. Leave me out to dry after I bring your company record profits? Let's see how that plays out for you. Let's jump right in. Backstory. Circa 2017, I worked at a small 36-room condo hotel on Marco Island, Florida. And that property was owned by a small venture capitalist firm ran by 2 wealthy siblings and one of their sons. I was brought on board by a colleague who was hired as the general manager. Since this was a new and small operation that had pretty much zero actual industry knowledge or expertise, it was basically the GM and myself who were responsible for bringing real changes to the property, while also wearing multiple hats and doing the job of several roles with our industry experience. There was only one other office employee who was a curmudgeonly old lady. Ironically, her name was actually Karen, who basically just did the billing for unit owners and sat in the back when she could. I myself was responsible for not only the day-to-day front desk presence, phone presence, concierge presence, assigning daily housekeeping duties, and running a brief night audit, but most importantly, also managing the business revenue and strategy competitive set, and online room inventory with our own website and major OTA companies like Expedia, Booking, Trivago, etc. 2017 was a record year for us, and my revenue strategy earned the company several tens of thousands of dollars, more than previous years by comparison. Then, crap starts slowly hitting the fan Q2, Q3. My colleague, the GM, resigned due to personal issues, completely unrelated to his work performance. That brought the office staff down to 2 people, Karen and I. Karen had this month-long trip to Italy planned like 2 years in advance, so she was going to go regardless. Karen flies out in the midst of the news that there's a bad hurricane a few days out from landfall. Cue Hurricane Irma. For those unaware of hurricane grading, Irma made landfall in the US as a Category 4. That is staggeringly powerful. For reference, Katrina, which devastated New Orleans in 2005, was also a Category 4. Needless to say, everyone was on high alert and made plans to evacuate. During my evacuation, not on the clock or being paid by the company whatsoever, the firm's accountant called me on my personal phone asking me to walk her through the steps of how to remotely run the property management systems audit. With hotel computer systems, the day doesn't actually end until you tell the system that the day is over, and that it's time to run reports and tally up the numbers. So if no one is there to do the audit, the hotel will permanently be stuck on a previous day. I spent about 2 hours on the phone with her while evacuating from a natural disaster, and I was never compensated for it. Irma ended up making landfall on the island I worked on, and the entire surrounding area lost power for about a week. We all returned to devastation. Some of our rooms on the top floor having their walls and roof blown out, and slowly trying to pick the pieces back up. My hours were cut from 40 per week to about 16 per week, as the damage from the hurricane drove business way down. I was beginning to struggle financially, and I was forced to use all my PTO and vacation days I had earned up to this point to keep full paychecks coming in, as I was just some single 25-year-old guy who lived alone, and the company offered absolutely zero roadmap for getting back to full-time compensation. I sent the CEO, who I spoke with every week in revenue meetings, an email explaining the situation and asking for a possible advance to make ends meet for the time being. The email I got back was basically one sentence to the effect of, "OP, we'll be open again soon, thanks." Bold strategy. Let's see how that plays out for you, considering I'm the literal only person running the hotel operations right now. Within a week, I secured an interview for a better paying job closer to home, crushed the interview, and kept it completely to myself. The CEO's brother, the CFO, had flown down to be on property for the first day of the reopening, where business started to come back to normal. The day before the reopening, while in the office, I got a call from HR at the new company confirming the job offer, and to stop by later that day to finalize everything. I called the CFO and asked him to come down to the office because I wanted to talk. The second he got there and he asked what's up, I told him I was resigning, effective immediately. "OP, you realize that'll make it hard for us to open tomorrow, right?" Nothing personal. Just like your company has financial concerns that prevent you from keeping your only employee here to run the hotel, I also have financial concerns that prevent me from staying here as I have bills to pay. You'll be open again soon, don't worry. He gritted his teeth and said, "Okay then." I handed over my key to the property, got in my car, and never looked back. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called Neff in the House. It says, "Don't you just love when you can throw someone's words right in their face to screw them over after they screwed you over? Magnificent." OP replied to this comment and said, "At the risk of sounding fake, I omitted the part where there was a FedEx guy who tried to deliver a package in the middle of me telling the CFO that I was quitting. He awkwardly turned around and waited outside for our conversation to finish. We had the front door propped open to air out the moldy smell of hurricane damage, so he could still hear everything. As soon as the CFO left, the FedEx guy walked back inside with the package and said, 'Dude, that was effing perfect.' I don't think I'll ever have a better throwing it back in someone's face moment in my entire life." It sounds to me in this case like the CEO took it for granted that OP just wasn't going to leave the job because they needed it. You'd think if that CEO had any sense of foresight, when OP said they weren't making enough money, they would have been preparing for OP's eventual departure. But the CEO obviously wasn't that smart. Check out both OPs linked in the description down below. I thank you for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you tomorrow.